This week on Talk by Turner, we're taking a look at one of the most popular genres in media right now, true crime. Some questions we'll be asking are, what makes it so popular? How has social media affected true crime's popularity? What's the dark side of the world's true crime fascination? What are the ethical undertones of romanticizing and sensationalizing real-life criminals and killers? Whether you're a true crime buff or just a casual enjoyer of the occasional crime documentary, this episode of Talk is for you. I'm your host, Jeffrey Colon, and you're listening to Talk by Turner. Talk by Turner dives deep into intellectual discovery while examining what's happening in our world right here, right now. Join us each week to hear from industry experts and published authors as they share their knowledge and insight on today's most important topics. Now, let's see who's on this week's episode. This week on Talk by Turner, we're joined by Mitzi Szereto, author, anthology editor, and short story writer. Mitzi is the author of the popular true crime book series, The Best New True Crime Stories. And she's written about all kinds of different criminals and crimes. Most recently, she wrote Women Who Murder, an international collection of deadly true crime tales, which explores the psychology behind some of the world's deadliest female killers. Mitzi, welcome to Talk.
Thank you, Jeff. It's nice to be here.
So to start, my first question to you, why do you think people are so fascinated by true crime?
Well, we sort of think this is some new phenomenon, but I mean, if you go back historically, people were queuing up outside the courtrooms to be there at trials. I mean, the fascination with Jack the Ripper, Lizzie Borden. Back in the Victorian days of England, they would have these pamphlets printed out to give to people, and they'd be packed to the rafters watching these cases unfold in the courtroom. So, I mean, there was always a fascination, but I mean, obviously now we have so many ways to consume true crime. I mean, as you mentioned, podcasts, TV series, docudramas, films, books, all of that. And so when it's really out there, and when something's just attracts people's attention, then you're going to get more and more and more of it. But, I think it just appeals to our human nature, our curiosity, our sense of wanting to know more, to understand, to find out what makes people tick, particularly the perpetrators of these crimes. And, as I said, it's nothing new, but we are just being inundated with it, and we just have a lot of people who have different ways to access true crime. So obviously, it's popular. People just want to know more, and I suppose it's also morbid curiosity. I mean, we may not want to admit that, but that is part of human nature, and we just sort of want to look. We want to see.
Sort of like the philosophy of I guess when you're going by a car crash on the highway, you slow down and take a look, right?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I'll be honest with you, that's one of the things that I don't do, because I just feel like, there's enough misery there, and I'm not going to go and have my eyeballs, like the old cartoons with the eyeballs coming out. I don't want to do that. But yeah, that's unfortunately probably most people do, the rubbernecking.
So how does all this consumption of true crime, whether it's through books, podcasts, documentaries, how does that impact how we navigate, our daily lives? Does it heighten our anxiety? Does it provide a sense of preparedness? Just curious for your thoughts on this.
Well, there's positives and negatives to it. You've made two excellent points there. We watch these true crime series listen to the podcasts, and it does make us more aware, especially women in particular, since women are more often the victims of crime. Unfortunately, that's just a fact of life. So, I mean, you might be watching something about another female victim, something happens to that woman, and you think, well, okay, I should be more careful when I'm doing this, or perhaps just do something a little bit differently than I've normally done. So yeah, it heightens one's awareness, but again, on the downside, it could also make you a bit more paranoid, a bit more anxious, a bit more of the thought process that there's evil lurking around every corner. And, maybe there is, but, you can't live your life like that either. So you've got to try to find a balance, and true crime can help you do that. But it's never good to go too far in either direction, really.
So you mentioned something interesting. Statistically, women are a larger part of being victims of crime. In the U.S., women are also twice as most likely to listen to true crime podcasts compared to men.
Yes.
And this is according to the Pew Research Center, some research they've done. Why is this the case? Why do you think that is?
Yeah, that's an interesting phenomenon, and I actually looked up that research, and some of the things on there surprised me, particularly the one about education level. That shocked me. I'm not even sure I really believe that, because no one ever asks me to do any of these polls or statistics, and I don't know anyone who ever is asked. But again, because women are more often the victims, perhaps that's one of the reasons they're interested in pursuing in engaging with true crime. And they're looking at some sort of situations where maybe they would have more empathy for that victim. Maybe they think they'll learn something, and they can, as we mentioned about being more aware, heightened awareness. But one interesting thing about true crime, and as we mentioned earlier about all the podcasts, and God, there's a lot of podcasts. A lot of these, well, not a lot, but there's a number of popular true crime podcasts that attract women, and they're really more like influencer types doing these podcasts. And so perhaps when you look at some of the women who consume true crime and that are the younger women, they're getting that demographic in, and some of these podcasters, as I said, that are basically influencers, I suppose they've gone up a step. Instead of pushing makeup tips on TikTok, they're pushing true crime stories. So that might account for one chunk of the consumers that happen to be female.
Your recent book, it's called Women Who Murder. It takes a look at the psychology and history behind women murderers and criminals. In general, would you say that female killers have different motivations behind their crimes compared to men? And if so, why do you think this is the case?
Well, I think the big difference is that when a lot of men who kill, it's more of a sense that there doesn't necessarily has to be some personal reason, whereas women are more inclined to do so for a personal reason. I mean, for instance, statistically, they're more likely to kill someone they know, a family member, a partner, even a coworker. You don't hear as much about them just killing randomly as you do men, unfortunately, that kill randomly. But motivations can be, financial is a big one. Some knock off the husband, get the insurance policy. I mean, that goes back, way back, for a very long time. Jealousy, revenge, sometimes self-defense. If a woman is in an abusive relationship and there's just no help, and she just seems to be trapped in this and can't get out, they might kill as a way out. So that's not an uncommon one either. But there are women who kill because they really like it. These are the ones that kind of push people's buttons and shock the most. for instance, I mean, if we want to talk about serial killers, there are women serial killers, obviously. And serial killers, statistically, there's a sexual motivation with men. But it also does apply to women who do the same thing. I mean, we have cases, I mean, we had like Rosemary West, Carla Homolka, you know, they were getting off on it just the same way that a male serial killer will. And I have some instances in the book about these kinds of women, and they just enjoy killing.
They just enjoy killing.
They just enjoy killing, yeah. I mean, just as what a male serial killer would.
Now, true crime has become one of the most popular podcast genres. It's been consistently in the top 3 categories of podcasts over the past 5 years, and probably will continue to climb or stay in the top 3. What's the real world impact, both positive and negative, of true crime's popularity on both the criminals and victims?
Yeah, that's one that I'm always aware of, because I mean, this whole argument about are we re-victimizing the victims and whatnot, that is a danger that we have to be aware of as creators of true crime. You don't want to, not to make an odd comment here, but stick the knife in further, and some of this does. You have to kind of balance it. And the real world impact is such that, do we really want to keep raking up these stories again and again and again, especially when there are still people who are maybe family members that are still alive, friends, perhaps some of the victims are still alive. So it's a matter of trying to get the balance right. Just as an aside, one of my contributors, she writes only historical true crime because she figures, okay, probably no one's going to get upset because these people have been dead for about a century, and also for possible legal ramifications. She figures she's off the hook for that. So I can see the point of doing that. But if you're working with something contemporary, I think the importance is that you need to be aware of there are people out there that could be affected by this. And so it's a balancing act. It really is.
Let's pivot to social media, because this plays such a huge part in terms of going hand in hand with the rise of true crime's popularity. So what's your take on how social media impacts both storytelling and fact checking?
Well, yeah, fact checking, that's an important one. And unfortunately, with social media, there is nobody who's monitoring these things. Social media is great. I mean, I love social media. I use social media. It's impacted my life in a really positive way. But when it comes to criminal cases or true crime and all of this, people can put out anything. And unfortunately, it can just spiral, and false information is put out, misinformation is put out. It could damage reputations. I mean, the whole canceling thing, that's an adjunct of it as well. And if you put things out and you don't know what you're talking about, or you don't have all the proper facts in, and you haven't done your research, this could even give rise to vigilantism. People's safety can be affected. Someone sees a tweet and they go, "Oh my God, so and so down the road is a serial rapist," when maybe that person was mistaken identity, and someone goes and burns their house down. So it's a real concern.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask the question of, when you mentioned vigilantism, you sort of have the rise of these citizen sleuths that are out there, people who are regular citizens that are trying to solve cases. So what are the benefits and drawbacks of regular people becoming involved in trying to solve cases?
Well, I'll mention some benefits. I mean, missing persons is one big one. This is a huge problem, and let's face it, police resources are stretched to the limit. There's only so much time they can put on a case before they have to move on to the next one and the next one. And as cases get older, they tend to get put shuffled aside. That's just the way it is. And so some of these sleuths, as we call them, they kind of get their hooks into these cases and they keep them alive, through podcasts, through blogs, whatever. And they have resulted in some positive things where people have been found, unfortunately, maybe some of them have been found dead, but at least it provides some closure. So in a way, it's like a little bunch of private eyes working on the side. These people have the time. They have the time to dig into cases and do the research that maybe the police can no longer devote time to. They've also helped with, for instance, wrongful convictions. That's a big one. There's been instances where someone has been rotting away in prison for something they didn't do. So there's some benefits to that. And some of these people are also maybe retired police, so they know what they're doing. They know what they're talking about. On the other hand, on the negative side, you can have these so-called amateurs impacting on a police investigation and butting in where they shouldn't and possibly derailing things. Yes. So that's one problem. The other is if they're not properly doing all their research, then they could be disseminating incorrect information. And that, again, starts a whole spiral out that doesn't help anyone.
What's your take on the romanticization of real-life serial killers and criminals? We've seen this over the past, I'd say, 40 years when people sort of put Ted Bundy into a spotlight because of, who he was, like the way he looked, let's say.
Yeah, Bundy's like the poster guy for this particular subject. Yeah.
So like when you think about that, and then you think about recent events of, the internet's obsession with Luigi Mangione, who basically is accused of shooting the CEO of United Healthcare. Like, what is your take on romanticization? Why do people, get so fascinated with killers?
Well, to go back to Ted Bundy, because like I said, he's the perfect example of this. I've referred to him in the past as the rock star of serial killers because he had been made into a rock star, and he's been dead, has it 4 decades? 5? Yeah. I've lost track. And yet he's as popular as he ever was. I think in that particular instance, he sort of is one of the first people that we were exposed to who changed what we thought of when we thought of serial killers. I mean, here's this guy, nice young man, seemingly nice young man. I suppose you could say he was attractive. Perhaps he was in the 1970s for that standard. And it just wasn't what you thought. So the irony is how he mutilated, raped, and murdered all these young women, and yet he had all these groupies show up in the courtroom who were young women who would have probably been just perfect victims for him. So there's just, I don't quite understand that phenomenon, but it does exist. So it's just, I think because he was just he broke the mold of what people's assumptions were is what created this whole fascination, compared to someone that maybe you would run a mile from if you happen to run into them in a dark alley. As far as Luigi, this is kind of an apples and oranges thing here, because, he's accused of one killing. He is not a serial killer, not to our knowledge. So I think the fascination with him is more that what he did struck a chord with a lot of people in the United States. They saw it as symbolic of their frustration with the healthcare system and the health insurance industry, and rightfully so. There's a lot to be upset about. So I think the fascination is with him, that if he did do this, it's just maybe more of a sense of perhaps a lot of people could kind of get behind it, which doesn't excuse murdering someone. But I think when we saw on social media how many people kind of were like, yeah, right on, that kind of says a lot about where we are in the United States and the kind of problems that really do need to be solved.
How do you, as a writer, like when you put yourself into the mindset of writing about this, like how do you balance providing, facts and nuance, which is important when you're writing about true crime, along with providing a good story that sort of interests readers? Just curious for how you approach this.
Well, yeah, that's something that definitely you need to work on because you don't want it to be a story to be very dry. I mean, you're not reading a newspaper account. I actually had done my undergraduate studies in journalism, so in a way, when I came into true crime, I pulled from all the things that I learned, such as balancing and fairness and giving voices to both sides, looking at things from different angles. But to me, the most important thing is whatever goes into a story, it should be factual, it should be researched as much as you can possibly research it and fact-checked as much as that is possible to do, because the word is true in true crime, and unfortunately in some instances that true is not necessarily true. So I think the point is what's interesting about these stories is to try to get into seeing things from different angles, exploring things from different angles, maybe incorporating how these cases impact on society as a whole and on people as a whole, just to give a more well-rounded thing as opposed to just saying, okay, this is so-and-so. John Smith went out and he killed 5 people, and this is how he did it, and these are the names of the people he killed. That's boring. And it doesn't really serve anybody to read that. It's just they're not getting anything from it. So the point that I like to make is maybe when they finish reading something, they'll think of things in a new way, or they'll have learned something, or might even change their opinion about something.
So a criticism of true crime media is that it's often, we put focus on, the killer in a lot of these stories. We want to know about their background. We want to understand their motivations. But as a result, we leave a lot of the victims' stories behind. It gets lost in the audience sort of obsession of wanting to learn more about the perpetrator. So with this in mind, how should creators of true crime content balance the need to tell both sides of a story while being aware of the trauma and pain felt by crime victims and their families?
Well, I always try to incorporate the victims in the pieces that I write. And for my anthologies, I encourage that as well with those people who write for me. Because we should not forget who these victims are. They're not anonymous people. And if we just focus on the perpetrator, it's in a way erasing these people's lives. And that's really not fair. We have to understand the impact of what these actions caused to others, to the victims. And so you get a handle on, who these people were, what they were doing in their lives, and how these things just basically, bang, something stopped. Yeah. Either their life stopped or something impacted on them that changed their lives in a really negative way. So there has been a lot of criticism in the past that the victims are ignored, but I think that's changing with most people who approach true crime in a really ethical way. I think they're definitely clued in that, no, we are going to show a well-balanced piece and hear from both sides.
So that ties into, as consumers, if we use that term, how do we navigate this ethical gray area when engaging with, true crime content?
Well, I think there's always going to be someone who's unhappy, with whatever's written or perhaps broadcast on television. Someone will be unhappy, and you can't. Obviously, I think unless we just completely stop, there's no way to avoid that. But I think the best thing to do is to put yourself into these people's shoes. Say, how would I feel if this is written or this is broadcast, how would I feel if I'm that victim? And that might help as far as when you're actually producing the material, that you're always aware that these people are there, they've been affected, and do you really want to exploit them? As I said, there's still going to be there'll still be unhappy people, and there's no way to get around that, and justifiably so. But having the empathy, making sure really that what you're talking about is fact-based. Don't glorify someone on one side and maybe just further exploit the people who have already been victimized. It's a balancing act. I mean, some people get it right, some people get it wrong, and as I said, you just are not going to be able to have everyone happy at the end of it.
True crime and its influence on fictionalized crime. We know when we read or watch a lot of fictionalized crime stories, you may even see inspired by real events. How do these play off one another? Like how does one genre impact the other and vice versa?
Yeah, the fictionalization of real events. I'm that there's some things about that kind of I don't sit too well with me. When something's actually happened and we have verification of what's happened, whether it's a court trial or his actual biography of someone or autobiography, and when you start fiddling around and creating scenes and creating characters, I don't know. I think in a way, wouldn't it be better to just create something brand new and say, well, it was inspired by this case, but it's fiction, so at least we know, as opposed to saying we're doing a story about so-and-so and this is their life story or this is their whatever happened, and then there's all this stuff in there that is fake. I know this is a little aside from true crime, but like, for instance, the TV series Victoria about Queen Victoria. Okay, I admit, I think it was an excellent series, but there's things that were invented in that. I know the writer did research heavily, but things were invented. Are we not rewriting history by doing things like this? Whether it's Victoria or it's an actual about a true crime case.
Yeah, you bring up a good point there, because a lot of times viewers or readers, that might be the first way that they are influenced by something. And so they take that story in, which is fictionalized, and assume it's real, assume that that's what happened. And
it's rewriting history. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What if you could choose one true crime story, whether it's something you read in a newspaper or a magazine or online, a book, something that was maybe on a podcast? What's one that's most interesting to you that sort of sticks in your mind?
Oh, well, usually if something really is interesting to me, I'll try to write about it myself. So, if I can mention, for instance, I think the last piece that I actually wrote is the one that appealed to me, because when I start to research for something that I'm going to write, I want to find something that is a bit different and a bit not as well known. So that's usually the kind of things that would appeal to me. And I wrote a piece about Iran's first known female serial killer, which, I felt like I kind of hit gold when I came upon that case. So I just liked something that is just hasn't been done to death. And that's the kind of thing that sticks out the most to me.
What's one thing you hope listeners will take away from our conversation today?
Well, that there is some very good quality true crime out there. You need to find it. People that are reporting on it in an ethical way, that they have some integrity behind what they're doing, that aren't exploiting or sensationalizing. You can find good stuff. Even with the podcasts. I've worked with many podcasters who have written stories for me, and these people have integrity. Perhaps, raise your bar and look for the good stuff, and look about and think about what's being said and try to take away something from it, either something that makes you more aware, makes you just look at things from a different perspective. Like with the books that I've done, have a more global view to kind of broaden your horizons and realize there's other things in other parts of the world and perhaps other ways that things are approached, and crimes and how, the crime and punishment, how they're done in other places. I think think global, especially now.
Yeah. Mitzi, where can listeners or viewers find you online?
Well, I have a website, of course, MitziSeretto.com, and I'm probably on every social media platform there is: Facebook, X, Threads, Blue Sky, Mastodon. God, did I leave anyone out? I'm everywhere.
Mitzi Szereto, thanks for joining us on Talk by Turner.
Thank you so much for having me.
Talk by Turner, hosted by Jeffrey Colon. Watch and listen now wherever you enjoy podcasts.